So today's webinar is entitled Maximizing ROI, Return on Investment for Machine Translation Systems. So I'm Tony O'Dowd, and I'm the founder and chief architect of CantanMT.com. So what we're going to cover today is I'm going to give you just 2 or 3 minutes on what the company is. It's not meant to be a marketing campaign or a marketing presentation, but we will tell you a little bit about ourselves, what we stand for, and what we do well for our clients and how they benefit from what we do. Then I'm going to talk distinctly about the factors that influence a high return on investment for machine translation, because machine translation has become a very hot and topical subject in the last, I guess, 12 months. And there's lots of large companies and small companies moving and starting to deploy machine translation. And I'm going to talk about what we've done for our clients to help them maximize the investment that they're making on machine translation. And what I'm going to talk about today is not necessarily the return on investment in the physical operational of the engine, because clearly that's important, and Deepan will cover that later on today. I'm going to talk about some other issues around the management of machine translation that are equally important and equally add to getting a high return on your investment in machine translation. So I'm going to talk about the software that we've developed to help project managers make the right decisions at the right time, and to solve the problem of how they can actually post-edit or manage a post-editing project. In addition to that, because our clients worldwide are building lots and lots of engines, it's very important that we can build those engines with high levels of predictable quality in a very short period of time. And I'm going to talk about how we've managed to condense the development of an engine, the time frame involved in that, into as small a time frame as possible so that people can get into the MT game and start machine translating and using machine translation systems as a productivity enhancement. Then I'm going to pass over to Deepan, who's then going to give you some really interesting and really insightful customer case examples of how they've been able to use our platform and actually maximize the benefit to their clients for introducing machine translation. And in a lot of cases, we're going to hear stories about clients that have deployed high-quality machine translation for the very first time. And this is interesting in the sense that for a long time, people have traditionally viewed machine translation as complex, very slow to develop, very slow to deploy, and very costly. Well, you're going to hear examples today of how you can actually get into and add machine translation to your existing workflow with minimal friction. And of course, if you introduce it with minimal friction, of course you're going to get a more positive and higher impact ROI as well. And then at the end of this presentation today, we're going to have some questions and answer sessions where you can ask us hopefully some easy questions, but I'm sure we'll have some challenging questions as well, and Deepan and I will try our best to answer those questions as best as possible. We have you guys for an hour today, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you find this helpful and insightful to what you're doing in your business today. So what is CantanMT.com? Well, CantanMT.com is a statistical machine translation system or platform. We are cloud-based, incredibly scalable, insanely inexpensive to operate, and it's very, very fast to develop engines, improve engines, and then deploy engines within your localization workflow. And our vision as a company is to give you to do things, 3 things really, really well, and to empower you to do them yourself. It's to help you customize your own engines, improve those engines, and then deploy those engines. So if somebody asks me today what we do as a company, we do customization, improvement, and deployment really, really well. And they really add to improving the ROI for our clients. Now, we're a relatively young company. I'm probably the oldest person in our company today, the only person with grey hair or a receding hairline, as they constantly remind me of. And although we're such a young company, we've covered quite a long distance. CantanMT today is probably the fastest growing machine translation vendor in the world. It's probably got the largest deployment of machine translation engines in the world today. And at the moment, we have 6,900 engines in production used by our clients worldwide. In the last 12 months, 83 billion words have been uploaded to our servers by our clients, by the members of our platform, and they have used those words to build their own engines and deploy their own engines worldwide. And that number is accelerating on a monthly basis. In fact, in this month alone, 3 billion words were added as training data by our members. And in the last 9 months, we have translated 669 million words on behalf of our clients worldwide. So although we are a relatively young company and we're dealing with big numbers here, we have traveled a long way and become very proficient in actually building and helping our clients deploy machine translation engines. So what's the first challenge that we help our clients overcome in order to maximize return on investment? Well, after you've built a system, a machine translation system, you've got to be able to manage a post-editing project. And traditional MT has been quite a difficult thing to manage, and that's because we don't have deterministic measurement systems to tell us about the quality of the generated machine translation system. So let's step back a little bit and talk about the industry and the use of translation memory. The translation memory technologies that we use, be it Trados, Alchemy Catalyst, MemoQ and so on, and MemSource and so on, these are great products, and what they have in common is that they have a measurement system that tells you how much translation has been reused from a previous project and gives you a general sense of the quality of that reused translation. And of course, that's referred to as a fuzzy match score. Unfortunately, in machine translation, we don't have a fuzzy match score. We don't have the capability to give you, as project managers, a sense that this sentence is of high quality, is of low quality, or is of really bad quality. So it's very hard for a project manager to manage these post-editing projects, because the 3 questions that he has to ask: how long will it take, how much will it cost, and how many translators will I need, how many resources do I need to deploy to finish this post-editing project, is a real conundrum. How do I solve that problem? Well, Canton has been busy trying to solve this problem for our clients, and in order to solve it, we've introduced a technology called Canton Analytics. And what Canton Analytics is basically a fuzzy match score for machine translation systems. And what it in essence allows you to do is to take translations, sentences for translation, and determine the quality of the translation output. Now, why is that important? Well, if you go back to fuzzy match, we charge different fees depending on how high the fuzzy match score is. And we associate a high fuzzy match as meaning that we have to do less post-editing effort to finish that translation. Well, Canton Analytics has a similar scoring system, which your project managers can use to determine how many translators we'll need to add to a project, how long it should take to finish that project, and more importantly, what is the cost of finishing that post-editing project. So for the first time ever, we've now been able to give project managers the business intelligence that they need to really schedule in a very deterministic way post-editing projects. This is the report that we've generated to help our clients navigate and understand Canton Analytics. And you can see it's quite a pretty report. It looks very well on the screen and so on, but it also displays in a very visual way some really key business intelligence measurements. So the very first thing we tell our clients is how much of the job has actually, or how much of the translation has come through total recall. So what is total recall? Well, built into the core of a Canton machine translation engine, because you train that engine using bilingual data, which is typically an export from a translation memory platform, we use that data to train the statistical machine translation engine. But at the same time, we build you a high-speed, high-quality translation memory. And that translation memory is called total recall. So KantanMT is actually the fusion of 2 technologies, translation memory and machine translation, all under the one platform. And what that first value tells me is that 27% of the translation from this job has come from a translation memory update. And that means that 73% has been statistically generated by the system itself. And that's what the second value there. This histogram then tells us the quality of the translation across different quality ranges. So we have quality ranges of 100%, which means it's a perfect match, quality ranges of 90 to 99%, 85 to 89%, and so on, down to lower quality ranges. And each of those graphs tells us how much of the translation falls into that quality range. So in one graph, a project manager can see the general quality of the translation that's generated from this KantanMT system. Now, you might immediately say, my God, that looks very like a fuzzy match report. Well, in actual fact, we've designed it so that your project managers feel at home. They've seen this type of formatting before. They've seen these quality ranges before. It's generated from a Trados product. It's generated through a Alchemy Catalyst product, MemoQ, and so on and so forth. So they're familiar with what these terms mean. But more importantly, they can use this now to schedule and develop a cost model for a particular project. So we tell you things like the word count, the ranges, we tell you the placeholder count and the tag count as well. And a really cool feature of this technology is that if you're using Trados files or MemoQ files or any such as Alchemy Catalyst files or even files that are derivatives of XLIF, which is a kind of a standard in the industry, we embed a score, a Canton Analytics score, which we refer to as a quality estimation score, with every segment that you translate. And when your translator views that translation in their favorite CAT tool, where they used to see fuzzy match scores, they will now see the Canton Analytics quality estimation scores. So now they can filter their projects and prioritize what they're working on. So for the first time ever, Canton Analytics is a technology that provides deterministic quality estimation for machine translation systems and helps your project managers make the right decisions at the right time. And that's crucial in maximizing the return on investments. Okay, think of how the industry would have been hard to work with or schedule a translation project in the absence of fuzzy match scores. If we didn't have that universal scoring system, it would be very hard to actually determine the scope of a project. Well, Canton Analytics is the next generation of that type of quality estimation. Now, of course, the second challenge in working with machine translation is that traditional MT has always, or machine translation development or engine development has been a long, laborious, costly and expensive process. And it shouldn't be, because it's easy to apply a high level of automation to the steps that you have to follow in building an engine. So the second challenge that we have to solve for our clients is to go beyond building just a baseline engine or your first build of an engine, to actually improve that and then deploy that across the enterprise or integrate that into their localization project. So building the first engine is a relatively simple process on the Canton platform. You upload several types of training data. We use our data cleansers to cleanse that data into a normalized format that's suitable for machine learning. And then we actually score that engine automatically for you or measure the success of that engine automatically for you. But the real technique is how do you go beyond that baseline build and improve that engine to get it to a level of production quality that you can actually deploy that in a project. And to do that, we've built a whole range of technology called Canton Build Analytics. And this is a data analytics and visualization technology that helps engineers really measure the value, the quality, and the state of their machine translation engines. And it's clear to say, you'll hear this later on in Deepan's presentation, in the absence of this technology, building MT engines can be fraught with challenges and difficulties. But with this type of data visualization technology, even a novice engineer can have a good chance of building high-end, high-quality engines. So the very first thing that we build, or we measure an engine on, is that we build summary reports. We build F-measure analysis, blue analysis, tear analysis. We determine if there's any gaps in the data phrase tables. We also track every action that you take or you action on an engine in a chronological report called a timeline report, and that gives you the ability to have version control on your engines, a vital component, particularly if you're dealing with lots and lots of engines across the enterprise. And then using this technology as well, you can actually deep tune your engines for different writing output styles and for different domains as well. It's highly graphical, and we've built a technology called Canton Insight that helps engineers that perhaps don't have formal training in machine translation technology, are just learning the trade, so to speak. We've given this technology called Canton Insight that coaches them on how to improve an engine and what steps to follow in order to improve the blue score, the F measure score, and the TER score during the development phase of a particular project. So if you look at our F measure score, the very first thing we give you is we give you a single F measure score for an engine. That is a value to tell us how many correct words we've taken from the phrase table and placed in the target translation. But more importantly, we give you the distribution of that F measure score across the entire engine, the test data that we're using for this engine. And then we draw it in a graph format, so you can actually click on this graph and look at each segment that scores well and that scores maybe segments that score poorly. And by analyzing that data, we can make decisions on how to improve the training data on the engine and rapidly improve the quality of the output. And then if you're a novice engineer, you can use Canton Insight, and it gives you the next steps to follow in order to improve the actual quality of an engine itself. So it's designed to be highly graphical, because guess what, guys, we respond well to graphic type stimulus, but more importantly, it allows novice engineers or engineers that are not au fait with perhaps building engines in a traditional sense. It helps them to learn this new trade very, very quickly. In addition to you can drill into these reports. So if I double click on that graph, for instance, we get a full listing of each segment that we've tested the engine on, and we get the actual F measure score on the right hand side. And if we click into that segment on the screen, the actual Canton system will actually tell you how the engine has translated that segment as well. Again, very important information when you're fine-tuning an engine and getting it ready for production. The gap analysis then is a very important engine. A lot of our clients are very short on time when they're deploying and building engines, and if there's two things that I encourage clients, or we train clients on in order to improve their translation, we actually ask them to focus on glossary terms and add that into the training, and also to look for gaps in their phrase table. And we have a technology called Gap Analyzer, which actually identifies these gaps and displays it graphically on the screen. And that enables our clients to fill unknown words, or to add unknown words in other words, to train the engine to do a much better job translating content. You can also get the similar report for F measure and also for blue and TER. And then the final thing is our version control system, which is called Timeline. Allows a developer of an engine, a localization engineer, to track everything he has done, every action he's carried out on an engine in order to get it ready for production. So the net effect of all this technology, guys, is to make developing an engine much more visual. It reduces the time to develop those engines, and it helps engineers who perhaps have not got traditional training in MT to get into the game of building engines for their clients. So we focused on three things to help our clients maximize their ROI. For project managers, we've built Canton Analytics to help them make the right decision at the right time. For translators, we've embedded those Canton Analytics scores directly into their native file formats that they're using with the Trados product, with the MemoQ product, with the MemSource product, with Alchemy Catalyst, so they can see quality estimation scores for machine translation output in their favorite CAT tool. And then finally, for the developers, these are the localization engineers charged with the responsibility of building engines. We've given them a whole interactive development environment called Build Analytics to help them customize engines and improve engines rapidly, which gets them to the point where they can deploy them. And if they can do that quicker, they can actually maximize the return on investment for their clients or for their company as well. So what I'd like to do now is pass over to Deepan, where he's going to explain how his company, and with the benefit of some case studies from his clients, where they've been able to use these technologies and holistically improve the localization process, improving productivity, and rapidly achieving high levels of ROI for their clients. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Tony, for the introduction and handover. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Deepan.Patel, and I am the Machine Translation Solutions Architect at Milengo. Today, I'm going to present 3 case studies of ours that will illustrate how we have implemented machine translation and post-editing solutions for our customers in order to drive meaningful localization cost reductions and improve time to market for their multilingual content. The 3 case studies will be of particular interest, I hope, to companies within the IT software, automotive, and e-commerce sectors, respectively. But before all that, I'll just provide some short background information on Milengo. We're a localization services provider, which was founded in 2005. Our European headquarters are in Berlin, Germany, but we also have additional production centers elsewhere in Europe, the Americas, and Asia, and we provide a wide range of localization services in over 70 languages for companies across a wide range of high-tech industries. One of our key services is customized machine translation and post-editing, which we have been offering our customers since 2009. We work with statistical machine translation rather than purely rules-based technology. This is mainly due to the much greater scalability potential, both in terms of adding further language combinations and expanding into more specialist domains in a highly efficient manner. The other really significant advantage of statistical MT is that we can use the multilingual content of our customers to build their systems tailored to their own content and which will only ever be used for their localization requirements. Our MT services are geared towards companies with large annual volumes for localization and who require a completely outsourced MT and post-editing solution. I must emphasize here that our MT services always involve post-editing. This is to ensure that the quality of our translated content always meets the very high quality requirements of our customers. Post-editing refers specifically to the discipline of correcting machine translation output to ensure the grammatical correctness of translations. Essentially, it can be seen as a very thorough level of quality assurance for machine translated content. Our main MT services are shown on the bottom half of this slide. The one that may be of most interest to attendees of this webinar is our MT and post-editing feasibility study. This is aimed at companies who would like to incorporate MT as a component to their localization toolset, but who don't have the resources, both in terms of time and personnel, to do the necessary evaluation and implementation. The feasibility study is something we do for free, but this is dependent on some criteria, largely relating to how much bilingual data your organization can provide for MT engine training. For more information on our MT-related services, please do visit our website or drop us a line. We make use of a number of statistical MT platforms, but we are particular fans of the very powerful solution developed by KantanMT. From our experience, no other MT provider offers its users as much meaningful information about MT engine build process, as is the case with KantanMT. This is especially evident in the build analytics reports, which Tony talked about in some detail, which are available after every engine build on the platform. For example, the data rejects report is particularly important to us so that we can see exactly how much of our training data is considered unsuitable and why. All this information is logged on the bilingual sentence level, which enables us to apply the relevant corrective measures to the phrase pair and then reuse it in future engine trainings. The key point here is that we can negate the loss of training data to an absolute minimum. The second really great component of the build analytics feature is the gap analysis report. Any term gaps in the training corpus are flagged in this report so that we can focus on expanding the engine glossary data in order to bridge these gaps. As with everything on the KantanMT platform, the information is presented with utmost clarity and serves the purpose of enabling users to focus on making meaningful improvements to the performance of their MT engines. I'll talk a bit about Canton's PEX editor during the second of our case studies, but this is a really great feature which is designed to reduce the number of corrections that linguists have to make during post-editing. All these features on the KantanMT platform have certainly enabled us to sharpen up our MT engine building exercises, so we are very appreciative of the efforts made by Tony and his team to help empower the users of their platform as much as possible. And now I'll move on to our 3 case studies about how we have applied machine translation and post-editing for our main MT clients at Milengo. One of our major machine translation buyers is a company called Interactive Intelligence, who provide a variety of cloud-based and on-premise contact center software to mid to large-size organizations around the world. A large part of their localization budget was tied up in their online help content for their software products, which encompasses hundreds of thousands of words. The online help gets updated in yearly cycles and is then localized for their global customer base to tight release schedules. The content is very repetitive, is authored in fairly controlled fashion, and contains for the most part very consistent terminology which needs to be localized uniformly. With so much of their localization budget allocated to the online help, their director of globalization needed to find ways of reducing these costs whilst ensuring that the quality of localized content was not compromised in any way. At this point, his thoughts turned to machine translation and whether it could help to solve this challenge. The problem for Interactive Intelligence was that they were not able to conduct investigations into machine translation just by themselves. This is where Milengo came in, and we offered them a free pilot project in which we could help them out with their evaluation of MT. The language pair which we tested was English and German, and our remit for the pilot project was clear. Interactive Intelligence needed the pilot project to exemplify that a high-quality MT engine could be set up in a relatively short period of time. But the main task was to demonstrate that the custom-built MT engine would facilitate significant improvements in translator productivity and therefore enable meaningful project cost reductions. Improved translator productivity would also help reduce the stress around meeting their tight release schedules. As ININ support a number of languages for the software and online help, it was also very important that the MT-based solution could be scaled up efficiently to include additional supported target languages for the online help. All ININ needed to provide for the pilot project were their language assets in the form of their available translation memories and glossary files. No other investment in terms of money or time was needed from them. All the work completed during the pilot was performed by Milengo. The training corpus supplied by ININ was supplemented by additional in-domain and text-relevant bilingual content that Milengo was able to provide. Before initiating engine trainings, we took great care to clean the assembled training corpus as much as possible and developed high-quality tuning and test sets for the engine build in order to optimize and evaluate the build process effectively. After each system training during the pilot project, we were able to record meaningful improvements in the quality of machine translation output and also verify improved post-editing productivity during our test runs. Our post-edited samples from the pilot were approved by ININ's language reviewers, and so they asked us to put together a pricing model for the localization of the online help to one of their software products. This involved the post-editing of around 185,000 words into German. The results of the pilot meant that we were able to offer them a post-editing pricing structure which represented a 27% cost reduction when compared to their existing translation rates. The pricing model was compelling enough for ININ to award us their online help localization work into German, and on successful completion of the first project, we were asked to scale up the MT solution to include 4 additional target languages. All of this was accomplished within a period of 6 months. So, what are the benefits for Interactive Intelligence of using machine translation and post-editing for their online help? Well, first and foremost, the careful engine customization, evaluation, and improvement cycles help to significantly boost linguist productivity for each language pair, in some cases of up to 50% without any compromise on the quality of translations. The quality of our post-edited content was verified by client review phases configured into the project workflow. As a result, we have been able to meet the time-to-market objectives for their online help release cycles. Through vastly improved linguist productivity, we can consequently offer Interactive Intelligence project cost savings of between 27 to 40%, depending on the language pair, when compared to their previous pricing model. As our MT engines improved with the incorporation of large volumes of post-edited content into retraining cycles, we reduce our post-editing costs after certain thresholds of post-edited content have been reached. And if their thoughts turn to increasing the supported languages for their online help, they know that the custom MT solution in place can be scaled up in a highly efficient manner to meet the new requirements. So, with very minimal investment from Interactive Intelligence themselves, we have been able to introduce a high-quality MT-based workflow solution for them, which is reducing localization costs for large volume projects on an ongoing basis. The only costs that they incur are post-editing ones. We don't charge them for the hosting or maintenance of their MT engines. So that concludes this particular case study, which is focused on our application of MT and post-editing for software support documentation. The second of our case studies relates to applying MT and post-editing for automotive parts catalog data. Our customer in this case study provides online vehicle parts selling software solutions for some very high-profile global automotive companies. The French, German, and Spanish-speaking markets are of particular importance to our client, but whilst they have a fully localized user interface to their software, the actual catalog data within had not been previously localized. This was mainly due to its sheer volume, which amounts to over 300,000 words, and would have been very expensive to have translated at their existing localization rates. But they were receiving requests from their own end customers to provide localized parts data in order to help foreign language users search for the requested car parts in their own language. So at this point, our client turns its attentions towards machine translation, and in conjunction with them, we designed a testing scope for MT and post-editing in the form of a free pilot project for one language combination, which was English to German. The requirements from our client for the pilot were very simple. We were to demonstrate that MT and post-editing could provide a high-quality and cost-efficient localization solution for their car parts data. If the results from the pilot were successful, then Milengo would be expected to scale up the workflow solution to include German and Spanish. Our client was able to provide extensive translation memories for English to French, but unfortunately no glossary data. So one of the key areas that we focused on during the training data preparation phase was to create a large bilingual glossary which could provide as much coverage of core automotive terminology as possible. It really cannot be underestimated how valuable glossary data is for building MT engines. If the MT engine has the correct terminology within glossary files used for training, then it recognizes this data as being statistically relevant during the machine translation process and applies the correct localized forms. In practical terms, this means that linguists have to spend less time correcting terminology errors when post-editing, and it therefore helps as an aid to their own productivity. The other focus of our work during data preparation was on applying normalization to the training corpus before engine building. One of our clients' requirements for localized content was that there should be no abbreviated forms of terms. But as the translation memory data contained a mixture of abbreviated and non-abbreviated terms, we standardized all the occurrences of abbreviations to their fully transcribed forms. And we were able to use the KantanMT PEX editor to create automated post-editing rules which ensured the correct syntax of localized content. This in particular really helped to reduce the number of corrections that our linguists had to make during our post-editing test runs. And after all this testing and evaluation, we were able to record some very useful post-editing metrics from our linguists, which represented around a 30% increase when compared to standard translator productivity. We used all this information to put together a pricing proposal for the localization of the entire volume of car parts data. That was a 28% cost saving when compared to our client's existing localization rates for French. As the results from the pilot were so good, our client asked us to deploy the same workflow solution to include German and Spanish as additional target languages, and then start immediately on the localization of the data. All of the work completed during the preparation phase meant that we were able to deliver high-quality localized content within a period of 4 weeks, which was a very good thing, as the rollout schedule announced to our client's own customers did not allow any room for maneuver whatsoever. So for this customer, we can state the following benefits of machine translation and post-editing. The pilot project enabled us to demonstrate that customized MT and post-editing could provide high-quality localized car parts data. Our customer was very impressed with the quality of the sample post-edited content we delivered as part of the pilot, and it was really this that convinced them that MT and post-editing was the way to go for this type of content. The custom workflow solution developed during the pilot was scaled up in a period of 3 weeks to include 2 additional languages. Any future requests from end clients for further languages can therefore be met in a very scalable fashion. As a result of the very careful preparation work undertaken by Milengo during the pilot, we were able to complete the localization of almost 300,000 words into 3 languages within 4 working weeks. The configuration of automated post-editing rules helped to increase translator productivity significantly, of between 30 to 60%, depending on the language, when compared to a human-only translation approach. As a result, we could offer our customer post-editing rates which were very meaningful cost reductions when compared to their existing pricing model. For the first time use of a custom MT and post-editing workflow, these numbers already represent a significant return on investment for our customer. And once the project was over and we had incorporated the post-edited content into engine retrainings, we lowered our post-editing rates in proportion to the improvements in engine output quality. We now localize all the updates to the car parts data in monthly cycles using the custom MT workflow solution and are enabling further project cost savings for our customer. So that concludes this particular case study on our application of MT and post-editing for automotive parts catalog data. The third of our customer case studies today relates to our work for a Norwegian e-commerce company called Nethandelen. They have a series of web shops for the Danish and Norwegian markets in which they sell a wide range of consumer products. In the summer of 2014, Nethandelen had made the decision to launch their existing beauty products web shop for the Swedish market. The problem was that they'd left themselves a very short time frame to do so. Their existing Danish site consisted of almost 780,000 words of content, largely relating to very repetitive product descriptions. All of this content needed to be translated into Swedish within 19 working days and for as little money as possible. The key issue, however, was time to market. Nethandelen really could not afford to miss the date of the Swedish webshop launch. A longer-term consideration for them was that for future product updates, they needed a highly automated workflow so that transfer of content between their content management system and their translation provider's tool could be managed via API connections. This would allow for a very sophisticated real-time project workflow. Every time new products would be added to, say, the Norwegian webshop, these would also need to be made available on the Danish and Swedish ones too, and as quickly as possible. This means that the product descriptions need to be translated very swiftly and then submitted for publication on the different language region sites. Milengo was able to offer Nethandelen a machine translation-based workflow that would deliver the localized content within budget and, most importantly, before their launch date. It must be said here that Nethandelen were not absolutely convinced at the very beginning that MT and post-editing was going to provide high-quality translations, but we managed to convince them otherwise with the work that we completed for their Swedish webshop launch. Because of the very short time frame allocated for the project, there was no time to test and evaluate workflows in a pilot project scenario. We really had to draw on our prior experience with running successful large-scale MT and post-editing projects in order to be able to provide both a workflow solution that we were confident in and also a pricing model which would fall within Nethandelen's budget. The added complication was that Nethandelen could only provide very minimal equivalent Danish and Swedish content, which we then had to align on the bilingual sentence level in order to create an engine training corpus. But due to the sheer repetitiveness of the content, both in terms of vocabulary and sentence structure, and also because of the very high similarity between Danish and Swedish, we were confident that even a relatively small engine training corpus could provide very usable machine translation output for post-editors. And because of the huge volume of content that would be localized during the project, we decided that configuring an engine retraining within the actual project cycle would facilitate better quality MT output. So once our linguists had post-edited 10,000 sentences, we initiated an engine retraining and were able to deploy it within just a few hours. This MT engine was connected to our translation environment via an API key, which meant that linguists were receiving translations from the engine in real-time fashion and then post-editing them on the fly. This retraining of the engine was connected to this retraining of the engine led to remarkable improvement in engine performance. Post-editor productivity leapt from around 5,500 words per linguist per 8-hour day to 8,000 words. Just as a point of reference, a typical daily productivity rate for a translator would range between 2,000 and 2,500 words. All this work meant that a very relieved and grateful NetHandlern received all their Swedish content a few days before their all-important web launch date. So for NetHandlern, the benefits of customized machine translation and post-editing can be summarized as follows. Without the MT solution developed by Milengo in such a short period of time, it is highly improbable that they would have met their time-to-market objectives for the Swedish webshop launch. The pricing model we put together not only fell within NetHandlern's budget, but represented a 62% cost saving when compared to the highest quote figure they had received from other translation providers. Within a period of a few weeks, we were able to scale up the workflow solution to include 2 additional language combinations by aligning any equivalent content between the language pairs to create training corpora for the additional MT engines. Their almost real-time time-to-market objectives are being met through the transfer of content for localization via API connectors between their content management system and our translation environment, which also have their custom MT engines as a fully integrated part of the workflow. This almost fully automated project workflow is something we are very proud of. As the performance of the MT engines improve with periodic retrainings, we consequently lower our post-editing rates to reflect the resultant improvement in linguist productivity. In short, with very little investment and with fairly small sizes of available training data, NetHandlern now have a very sophisticated machine translation-based workflow solution, which is enabling them to localize their content in a very quick and cost-efficient manner. Indeed, this is very much true for all our customers profiled in the case studies today. Despite the fact that the 3 companies belong to widely different industry sectors and have vastly different content localization requirements, the custom MT and post-editing solutions developed for their respective needs are in each case meeting their very similar objectives. So I hope that all the information presented here today has given our webinar attendees food for thought in terms of how customizable machine translation can help fulfill a wide range of localization needs. And that concludes my part of the webinar presentation today. Thank you very much for paying attention. I'll now hand back to Louise for the Q&A session.
Thank you, Deepan and Tony, for very insightful presentations. And we'd like everyone to remain on the line as we open the floor for a Q&A session. As I previously mentioned, you can post your questions in the chat pane located near the bottom of the control panel, or to Twitter using the hashtag #CantanWebinar. Okay. So I'm just going to put you over to Tony now to answer some questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Louise, and thank you very much, Deepan, for that very insightful and detailed presentation in regards the benefits that clients can get in using machine translation. And of course, a really kind of novel or unifying factor across a lot of those clients that was the first time they actually deployed machine translation. And I guess with the technology that's available today, with the platforms that are available today, we can actually get higher predictability, that we can get a positive ROI in using machine translation compared to, say, 2 or 3 years ago in the industry. So thank you very much for that insight. Now, we've got quite a number of questions here. And I guess, Deepan, I'll fire one at you straight away, and I'll read it out as it comes in to me here. Did you guys try any other existing MT solutions before adopting KantanMT? If so, what were the key factors that made you choose Canton?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Over the last few years, we've developed quite a bit of experience using different sort of statistical machine translation platforms. We do actually still use them just for cross-testing purposes and to sort of evaluate which one might be best applicable for a certain client's needs. But as I mentioned in the presentation, really we find that no other MT provider provides as much meaningful sort of insight into the engine build process as is the case with KantanMT. The results we've seen from using the platform are very comparable with very bespoke statistical MT platforms, such as Microsoft Translator Hub. But the really great thing about KantanMT is that we can focus on making very meaningful improvements to the quality of our MT systems through the build analytics reports that we get after every engine build. So really that for us is a key differentiator in terms of why we've chosen KantanMT as our preferred MT supplier.
Okay, thank you very much for this. And just a follow-on question here, Deepan, perhaps you can throw some insight onto this. And it is, what is the minimal reasonable size of a translation project to get a positive ROI on a KantanMT plus post-editing compared to human translation projects? Is there any kind of sweet spot there that you can share with us?
That's a very good question, actually. What we see as a very good application of machine translation and post-editing is for large volume projects where the benefits of translation memory alone are not providing enough cost savings for customers. So really, with the MT workflows that we put together for our clients, it's always a mixture of kind of using client TMs and machine translation engines, anything that really can't be leveraged from a translation memory, which would be no-match content. It's there where the real value of machine translation and post-editing is, because we can localize that content for cheaper when compared to sort of human-only translation approaches. So I don't know about sort of setting benchmarks, but if you do have a sizable amount of content which you can't leverage from your translation memory, and the content is suitable for MT, then it's very much worth looking into how custom MT and post-editing can lower costs while ensuring high integrity of localized content as well.
Okay, actually there's just a follow-on question from that, Deepan, and I've seen this question asked over and over and over again, and I think you'd be a great person to answer this, and it's to do with the size of a Cantan or a statistical machine translation engine. Do they need to be ginormously large? Is there a sweet spot for that? Can you do a sub 10 million word engine, or do you have to start looking at hundreds of millions of words? What's your experience on that? So how big does an engine have to be?
That's a really good question. That's one that we get asked quite a lot as well, because it really depends on how much bilingual content an organization has to be able to provide for engine training. Really the motto, I think, should be the bigger the better. So if you do have huge translation memories, tens of thousands of bilingual sentences, then you've already made a good start, I think. But really the most important, I think, is the quality of training data that's used to build MT systems. You might have a huge volume of bilingual content, but if it's not very good, then you're not going to really receive good machine translations from any custom-built MT systems. I don't know about a minimum threshold. Actually, through the net handling case study, which I presented earlier, we saw that actually with relatively small sizes of bilingual content, you can actually build an effective MT system. I think really the starting point we had for them was about 20,000 bilingual sentences. So that would be the sort of minimum threshold, I think, because we saw some very good results from just a relatively small training corpus size. But the more the better, but really do make sure that the quality of training data is optimal to build MT systems.
So it's really one of quality rather than quantity, really, isn't it?
I think both are really important. The bigger the training corpus, the better, but really the quality of it is also highly important.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a question here from a client attending the webinar, and it's about what are the skills associated with an MT, a machine translation engineer? What do they know, or what do they need to know to build an engine, improve an engine, and deploy an engine? Now, I'm going to jump in there, Deepan, if I may, but then I'll hand over to yourself because you might have additional information here. From our own point of view, guys, machine translation engineer needs to have certainly a background in the localization industry, because a lot of the work, the pre-work involved in building high-quality engines is the preparation of training data. So that means you're down at translation by memory files, bilingual files, monolingual files. You'll need to know a lot about those tools because you're going to export your translation memories from those tools. And I think that's very, very important that you have a good grounding in the localization process. The other part of your grounding or background should be is that you understand how translation memory systems work, because typically we see machine translation engines deployed alongside translation memory systems. So that's important that you're able to figure out how to streamline those two technologies into one seamless workflow. Now, of course, we provide a machine translation orientation course for all of our clients, and I think it's important that your engineer attends one of those courses or has done a module in college on machine translation and statistical machine translation learning, because understanding the part that bilingual data takes part in the learning process and monolingual data and glossaries and so on is important to understand how these different pieces of the jigsaw fit together to give you the optimum quality required as well. If you have a background in NLP, natural language processing, it's not essential, but it is a benefit, there's no doubt about that. And Deepan mentioned earlier on the use of the PEX environment and the Canton preprocessor technology, and they're built around regular expressions and a programming language based on a language called Gentry. It's a language that we've built ourselves, and I think some programming experience, some light programming experience would be very helpful in using those technologies and, more importantly, maximizing the use of those technologies in deploying engines. Deepan, do you want to add anything to that to round off that question?
I think you've given a very extensive sort of answer there. I would just echo what you said about, someone who's very familiar with localization engineering is very important. From our point of view, a lot of the work that we do when building MT engines is focusing on data preparation. So really sort of localization engineers who do have good experience with programming, writing scripts for preparation of data, using that knowledge to be able to select relevant test and tuning sets is really important. But from our point of view, just localization engineers, quite experienced ones, are a really good profile, I think, for sort of data preparation for building MT engines.
Okay, very good. I have one question here which is directed directly at your good self, Deepan, and it's from somebody in the automotive industry. And the question is that part catalogs is just one part of the automotive industry. Do you have any experience in how you would use machine translation for maintenance manuals? I can add something to that myself, but I'll let you start that.
Yeah, well, I think really what I've tried to illustrate with the case studies is that there really is a sort of wide application of how you can sort of use machine translation and post-editing. Really with sort of maintenance manuals, that to me would sort of represent content which is very technical, very repetitive, doesn't necessarily require much creative input from a linguist to render messaging effectively in translation. So really it's the type of content which should be the determinant in deciding whether to pursue machine translation. User manuals, operational manuals, anything that's very descriptive would be a good application of machine translation and post-editing, I would say.
Okay, thank you very much. In fact, one of our biggest clients in Europe is the biggest truck manufacturer in Europe. They're based in Germany, and we have 8 engines that are used to translate all of what they refer to as their TI documents, their technical information documents, and it's the information related to fixing parts and the maintenance of their trucks, which are translated into 8 European languages for their service centres all over Europe. So as Deepan mentioned, it's the content and the type of content that lends itself to machine translation technology, and certainly automotive industry has been a pioneer, I guess, for many years in the use of machine translation systems because of the content that they're working on. I have one last question here, Deepan. It's directly for yourself as well. And you mentioned in a previous in one of your slides there that you had to convince the client of the benefits of machine translation. Tell us a little bit more about that. How did you win that argument?
Well, you're referring specifically to net handling there. Yeah, I mean, I think that they wouldn't be sort of atypical about someone's sort of attitude towards machine translation, which can be sort of characterized with a fair amount of skepticism. They weren't, like I said, they weren't convinced at the very beginning that machine translation post-editing was the way to go, because they were concerned about the quality of potentially localized content. But for them, really, the key issue was time to market. They really left themselves with a very short period of time to launch a new website. So in that respect, they had no choice but to turn to machine translation post-editing. But what we were able to do during the actual course of the project was provide them with, samples of our post-edited content, which that they were absolutely happy about. And yeah, that really helped to sort of assuage their doubts when it came to the quality of what could be possible with machine translation post-editing. What really won them over was the fact that we were able to deliver the content within budget and really before their launch date as well. So those were the key sort of aspects relating to how we were able to convince them, providing them with samples, but also actually kind of making good on our promises as well to deliver the content on time.
Gotcha. I have one other question as well just before we finish up for today, guys, and it's to do with what's the part of the professional translator in the development and improvement of machine translation engines. Now, if I may, Deepan, I'd like to answer that and then maybe hand it over to yourself.
Sure.
In terms of the involvement of professional translators, it's absolutely vitally important to get them involved in the development of engines, and that's because the engineers that would typically build the engine may not be fully trained linguists. They may be more of an engineering background than a linguistic background, and that's fair enough because they're engineers. That's what you hire them for the technical ability to prepare data, manage the systems, and go through the development process. But at some stage when an engine reaches a certain level of quality, and Canton build analytics can be used to determine when you reach that point in your project. At some stage you're going to have to go through an LQR, a language quality review, which may be an iterative process, maybe over 3 or 4 iterations of test data and post-edits, where you're going to have to sit down with a professional translator and get their feedback to finesse the quality of the engine, to fix the sillies that happen during the standard training process, to finesse the use of terminology, to finesse the use of their training data, to look at gaps in the or unknown words in the engine, and to put suitable training data to fill those gaps. So in my mind, they're a critical part of building high quality machine translation engines, and in fact I could not imagine how we could build high-quality engines without working with a team of professional translators. And in fact, we're building, dozens of engines at the moment for a very large client in the e-commerce space, and we have an entire team of linguists working with us to finesse and to review the output from the engine and to feed that review back into the engine so that we can constantly improve it before it goes into production. Deepan, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I would just echo everything that you said. Our linguists are vitally important to us when building MT systems, particularly during evaluation phases of, say, after a first build of an MT engine, Obviously, the information that we get from the KantanMT build analytics is very important, but we do really rely on our linguists to be able to provide detailed analysis of how good an MT engine is performing, and also then to focus on making really meaningful improvements to our MT engine. So really vitally important to incorporate linguists as much as possible into the build and evaluation process. And then, of course, with post-editing, they're really to set the benchmarking for quality assurance of localized content. So, yeah, very important for us having linguists involved.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Deepan, and thank you for all of our attendees today for their intelligent and insightful questions. I hope we've done them justice and provided good answers and insights. And now I'd like to pass back to our host today, Louise.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you again, Deepan, for some excellent presentations. And also thank you to our attendees for their great questions and for taking the time out to attend the webinar. We will send an email with the link to the recording and the answers to everyone's questions in the next couple of days. And we hope to see you again for our future webinars. Thank you again, and goodbye.